It was once considered the most dangerous peacekeeping mission in the world, and for 3 years, he was the mission's force commander. Lieutenant General David Gyllensporre led the UN Peacekeeping Mission in Mali from 2018 to 2021. The mission closed at the end of December at the request of Mali's military government. We talked to General Gyllensporre about the changing nature of UN peacekeeping and what lies ahead for Mali. You were the force commander at the UN Peacekeeping Mission in Mali. Could you give us a sense about what the mission accomplished?
I think for most people, the mission is known for being one of the most challenging and deadly UN peacekeeping missions in history. While that is true, and they had a difficult exit during very difficult circumstances, there has also been significant progress made by the mission. One of the key deliverables that is very tangible is the fact that the mission stopped fighting between the armed groups for a long time, basically throughout the implementation of the peace accord, with some very few exceptions. And it also contributed to stability during the turbulent time where there were 2 military coups in the country.
Well, I mean, you're raising an important point, which is that the mission was able to actually protect some civilians in Mali and reduce the tensions between various fighting groups. As you look at what's going to happen now, do you see a likely increase in tension and insecurity in Mali as a result of the departure of the mission?
I think it's reasonable to assume that there will be an escalation of violence, and following this from a distance now seems to confirm, the reporting seems to confirm that. And we have to see how this unfolds because there are so many actors involved. And the peace agreement is formally still in effect, but the parties see themselves in a new position now, obviously. So there will be some efforts to advance different priorities. So we have to expect turbulent times ahead before there can be perhaps a new steady state.
And then, United Nations peacekeeping is changing and evolving over time. In 2024, we're going to see the closure of the mission in DR Congo. We just saw the mission close in Mali. Can you give us a sense, is this a trend in peacekeeping, or is it just two unique situations in Congo and Mali that have led to the closure of these missions?
Well, to add to what you're saying, we have had very few new missions, peacekeeping missions over the last decade, basically none, special political missions. I think that the stabilization missions that have been primarily deployed in Africa, MINUSMA being one, and also in Congo, MONUSCO, I think those kind of missions that are quite ambitious, not just in resources, but also in mandate, where there is basically not an accepted peace or a peace agreement. I think that the appetite for those kind of missions is not there anymore. So it's a critical juncture now to see how the UN could employ its resources in peacekeeping in other ways and forms.
If there isn't a peace to keep and there's no longer an appetite for those types of missions, can you give me a sense about what will likely replace it? I mean, what's the other mechanisms?
Well, we've seen a trend towards other security actors being more and more involved, and in many cases now the UN and peacekeeping missions are pursued alongside with other international contributions or commitments, and crisis area, conflict areas, I think increasingly will have this characteristic where there will be different missions operating alongside each other, ideally with the same overall objective, but certainly with very different mandates and different accountability.
Peacekeeping has also changed, and I'm sure you saw this when you were in Mali, in the rise of disinformation campaigns, and as well as the increase in other actors such as the Wagner Group in operating throughout the sub-Saharan region. How did that affect the ability of peacekeepers to do their job? How is it affecting peacekeeping more generally in the region?
No, well, that affected us on a daily basis, I would say, and really it was an uphill battle to try to counter disinformation and misperceptions also amongst the population and others, where there was a lack of understanding on the commitment and what kind of contributions that were reasonable to expect by the UN as a whole, but more specifically on the peacekeeping mission. And I think it starts in New York to try to temper the expectations of the missions and be able to communicate what missions are doing, but also the delineation. Obviously, being proactive in communication is a way forward to counter some of it, but it always has to be grounded in actions on the ground, because the communications have to be nested and linked to real progress and tangible activities, and that's what people can relate to, and that was what would make sense at the end of the day.
And what's frustrating at times is that these disinformation campaigns make it difficult to communicate the tangible improvements that peacekeepers are making in the lives of people, because they're just being countered all the time.
Yeah, and to give you a very practical and frequent challenge that we had in Mali was when we were trying to protect civilians, doing patrolling in exposed villages. In a number of occasions, we were blocked. The patrols were blocked particularly by women and children. They didn't want us there, and obviously they were manipulated to prevent us to do our job. And that obviously put the peacekeepers in a very difficult situation.
What are the biggest misconceptions that you hear about peacekeeping in world capitals, but also in Sweden, where you're originally from?
I think it comes back to the expectations. The peacekeeping, I think one of the former Secretary General said that peacekeeping is not getting us to heaven, but prevent us to go all the way to hell. Yeah. So it's really a remedy to solve some of the problems, but there are many other instruments, many other efforts that are needed, and also a sustained effort with persistence and continuation of priorities. So that's it's not an easy fix. The military, which I represent, has obviously one role, but the UN, the core strength of the UN is obviously that it has at its disposal so many other capabilities and areas of competence to bring together. A key problem that I don't think we have sort of figured out as an international community is the governance and how to foster good governments, because that's at the core of most of the conflicts that we see.
Well, and you mentioned the other competencies that the UN has. I worry that in places like Mali and DR Congo, with the departure of the military, then the ability of the humanitarians and the development workers to get around countries that lack basic infrastructure, including countries like South Sudan, is really limited, because you often were the lift and the security that allowed the broader UN family to do their job. Tell us about your book.
Addressing a topic that is not well known. That's the implementation of the peace accord. And I was the force commander in that capacity, also dual-hatted as the chief negotiator, chief mediator on the technical implementation of the peace accord. And in the book, I tried to illustrate the progress that we made, but also at the same time the complexities and the difficulties in achieving those goals. Hopefully the book will give an insight in how the political objectives were translated on the ground, and also some of the changes that we were able to make for the population.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for your leadership on behalf of the United Nations And thanks for taking the time to talk to us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.